class. Welcome back. So far we've covered variables, printing things out on the screen, uh, pretty much all the beginner level stuff at this point. So now we're going to talk about the wonderful, wonderful portion that you know, we learn all these little programming techniques, but honestly, you spend a small amount of time actually doing your programming. Generally, how it works for anyone who already knows this, forgive me, but you think of an idea for a program, or you're told to make a program. You and I would encourage you grab a piece of paper, sketch out what you need. You don't have to draw code or anything like that, but the idea, the logic, kind of how it all works. I find grabbing a piece of paper and writing it out helps you, you know, kind of put something down so you can just follow it. But let's say you spend a little bit of time, get this idea written down, you're ready to go. You open up the code, you start writing it, following your directions. Uh, and if you're smart, if you run into any problems, you will fix them immediately. But you can't always find your problem as soon as you run into it, or as soon as you are writing it. The problem may surface later when you add other things or something. And the problems I'm talking about are errors. Now, you'll spend a good portion of your time planning and building your project, but honestly, you'll spend probably way more time fixing your janked up code. Uh, there's a very real there's a lot of little memes and pictures and comics about it. But basically, you spend all this time building and crafting this wonderful project, and then there's some simple error. And you spend 5 hours trying to figure out, and it turns out to be like a little semicolon or something. Uh, this is why we're going to go over errors, because this is going to be something you're going to be doing. You're going to run into an error. No matter how good you are, you're going to screw something up. That's just what coding is. You screwing up constantly and then fixing the screw ups. Uh, some coders will kind of, I guess you can say, bootleg or kind of force a fix that isn't really a fix sometimes. I'm sure many of you have been on a program or played a game where, a little something happened and it was weird. You're like, what is this? And they release a patch and fix it, quotation marks. And you run it and, oh, well, that doesn't seem to be happening anymore. But it didn't actually fix the problem. It just made it look like the problem was fixed. There are plenty of cases where that happens. But now, the different types of errors that you're going to find. Some are easier to figure out than others. As we've been building our program and learning stuff, I've been showing you different errors that you'll run into. NetBeans and Eclipse are the two major Java IDEs that we use. And they each display errors a little differently for the most part. Now, I've been showing you, for example, like if you write down a variable int b or something, or I just type in b, it's going to tell me, not a statement because it's not a statement. It doesn't mean anything. If I were to try to print b, it's going to tell me, oh, or you're missing something. Sometimes these errors aren't super clear. Am I missing parentheses? Am I missing semicolon? Actually, what I'm missing here is a plus. Now it tells me cannot find symbol, and that's a very common error that says basically you're trying to display a variable, but you haven't defined it yet. So let's talk about the different kinds of variables you're going to find. Now I've made a project. You can go ahead and make your project. As I talk about it, we're going to go to this error checking here in just a minute, which should be in your modules, as long as you're in this class. Now let's talk about the different kinds of errors first. There's generally two major forms of this, and then there's a couple of sub kind of categories. So the first category is syntax errors, types of errors. I'll just put some comments here. Syntax errors. Now, a syntax error is very easy to spot because it's going to highlight in red. It's going to tell you, yo, that doesn't look right. If I were to do, for example, system.out.print line, but I forgot to capitalize the S. It underlines, and it says, package system does not exist. right? If you've never seen that, you won't know what that means. Now, I said before that everyone's going to run into errors. Everyone. And honestly, it's better that you run into errors. How you get better is to run into an error. If I haven't seen this before, I'd be like, I don't know what's going on. Google, search, ask questions. And then as soon as I figure out the answer, capital S, if I ever see that again, I can fix it faster. So don't be discouraged or distraught if you write a program and you keep having errors. Errors is, or having errors is not a bad thing because you learn from it. If someone goes through a lot of programs and never had a single error, when they get to a harder program and suddenly get 3 or 4 of them, they're not going to be that experienced with fixing them. Now, the problem comes in when if you have an error and you fix it, you don't learn that error. So if I do this again and I'm like, well, what is that? Even though I've seen it 2 or 3 times already, then you've got a problem. Because you need to memorize it. Make a little notebook of the errors you've run into and how to fix it if you need to. Uh, Hopefully, if you see it a couple of times, you'll remember it. But if you can't, then again, like I said, keep a little notebook out. Errors. Write it all down. Maybe put it into a Word document so you can easily search it. But most of these errors are online, and you can find solutions and examples and plenty of people who are talking about it. But try not to depend on the internet too much if you don't have to. Uh, Once you've seen an error several times, several different errors, they get much easier to fix. If I accidentally forget a semicolon or something, you know, semicolon expected, fairly straightforward. A lot of the time, the program will tell you specifically what the issue is. If I just say, int num, well, it's not how you write it. It doesn't specifically tell me that that int's wrong. It just says can't find symbol. It thinks it's a variable. Sometimes it's very straightforward. Here's your error. Sometimes it'll even offer to fix it for you, and it will. Other times you just kind of have to have enough experience with it. Now, syntax again, highlight in red, and that's mostly what I've been showing you. Those are fairly easy to spot because your program will not run. It'll be like, hey, yo, that's not cool. You can't do this. The other type of error, outside of syntax, let's see here. Syntax would be logic errors. Now, a logic error means that, as far as the syntax is concerned, it's right, uh, but it doesn't do what you expect it to do. If we liken this to a language, for example, if I was trying to speak Chinese or French or something, I may say the sentence, and if I say it incorrectly, that would be a syntax error. Instead of the cow jumped over the fence, I say the fence cow jumped over. The syntax wasn't right. A person may be able to kind of understand what I'm saying, but a computer won't. Now, a logic error would be, I meant to say the cow jumped over the fence, but I didn't know the name of the cow, what it is, so I said the dog jumped over the fence. But I meant a cow. That would be a logic error. As far as the program is concerned, it looks like it all works. Yeah. But as far as the meaning, it doesn't work. Like maybe I meant to do this. For example, I said int total equals 10 times 4, and I meant to say plus 4. Well, when I print this, or I do that. Well, one, I'm doing multiplication instead of addition. Another, I printed, well, the text instead of the actual variable, like this. So I'll get 40. And I'm like, well, that doesn't look right. A lot of people will complain that the program's not doing what it's supposed to do, but the program only does what you tell it to do. So if I tell it incorrectly, there we go, plus, it's going to work incorrectly. And there are several different kinds of logic errors that you can run into. Most of it just has to do with, your thinking's not right. You meant to go here when this happened, but you didn't write it that way. So these are much, much harder to find. Typically, you have to run the program and see that it's not working right to figure it out. That's how this works. Now there's another kind of subtype that goes with logic errors usually, uh, and that's called a runtime error. And basically that is an error that pops up when you run the program. Everything looks fine, you run it, and then the program's running, and then you crash in the middle of the program. That would be a runtime error. It means everything's doing what you think it should be doing, but yet it doesn't. It something happened, something variable got misplaced or mistranslated somewhere, and suddenly, poof, the whole thing breaks. A good example of this would be, let's see, how can I make this thing break? Let's just say int, let's just do a little print statement. And I say total divided by -1. Well, 0. I run, it crashes because you can't divide by 0. Now, as you can see, everything else ran, and then it got to a single line here and it crashed. That's what a runtime error is. And this can happen when you end up, let's say we're doing user input, which we'll be doing pretty soon, and I type in the wrong thing, or I try to convert something that can't be converted that way. The program may read it as, oh, that looks acceptable, but when it gets to it, it doesn't work. That's what your runtime error is. So we have syntax, logic, and runtime errors. And I just wanted to show you one other thing while we're on the case of errors. If you forget to delete that second name at the bottom, you'll end up getting this package at the top. And what a lot of people will do is be like, oh crap, I have that. Well, now you can't use this program anymore. In fact, it says incorrect package. Move to class, change. And some of these little things over here can actually fix stuff for you. This cannot. If you do happen to have the word package at the top, leave it. If we have to import anything, like the J option pane or something, it can't happen above this. It's javax.swing. See? No matter how good you are, you're going to run into an issue. And notice that error. Any imports have to go underneath that. Now for what we're doing here, it doesn't really matter if it's there or not. It's just better, honestly, just to get rid of it so you don't have to worry about it. But all right, so on to the project that you have to work on here. So first and foremost, what we're going to want to do is go back. And if you notice that I pop up and I have these little videos pop up on the right side, my little girls watch my computer in the afternoon sometimes. Sometimes it's nursery rhymes. Sometimes it's little cartoon TV shows. So no, I'm not watching, what is it, Strawberry Shortcake. Uh, Although, I don't know, maybe I would. No. Or Chinese nursery rhymes or whatever they're usually watching in the afternoons. But there you go. Now, what I want to do is go to the error checking, and I'm going to copy and paste this code. I'm going to start here at this first comment and go down to the last. So all of that's got to be highlighted. Right-click, copy. And I'm going to go to the project that we made, and inside the main, that means between this brace and that brace, I'm just going to paste it. Control V. And it'll put it in there. And there should be a myriad of errors that pop up when we do this, especially if you did it correctly. Now you can hit Alt-Shift-F, and it'll line things up a little better, kind of, for the most part, if you want to. That's real useful when you're writing code and things are kind of not aligned right. Alt-Shift-F formats it, basically lines everything up nice and pretty. So here's what we have to do for this. Basically, this is just a list of common errors that I broke in this code. You go down and fix them one at a time. Now, whenever you're fixing errors, few little notes. One, fix them from top to bottom. If you have an error and you're like, I don't know what that is, and you go to the next one and you start tinkering with other stuff, error up here could very well cause 3 or 4 errors down here accidentally because of lack of a parentheses or something. So you definitely want to fix them one at a time as you go down. Not every line is a syntax error. You'll see if If it's underlined in red, that's syntax. If it's not underlined at all, it may be correct, or maybe it's just a logic error. You'll have to read through the comments. Having comments is also very, very useful. Whenever you write code, it always helps to have comments. If you come back to a code, you know, a month or two later, and you look at it, what was I trying to do there? A little comment might remind you. So it's always good to have comments. Now, if you run into problems when you're writing your own program, this is oftentimes what happens to people. You run into an error, you sit there trying to figure out the error, you'll Google, you'll go back, you'll change some things, you'll go back, you'll change some things, and about an hour and a half, 2 hours later, it's still not fixed. Get up and walk away. Go watch TV, go eat a sandwich, go outside. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. Uh, got up, walked off, watched TV or something, and 20 minutes later, just not even thinking about it, just watching, and all of a sudden, poof, it pops in my head. Maybe that's the problem. I go back and it fixes. Of course, there's still several times where I went back and that didn't fix it, but it's always better to, you know, get out of the forest because just all you're seeing is trees. Back up and get a better perspective. Let your mind rest for a minute. If you get stuck in the middle of something, all you're gonna do is get frustrated. So if you find errors you can't fix, back up. It also, if you find errors you have problems with, ask for help. I have so many people who sit silently and don't say a thing, get through a program or two, and they fail everything because they're not asking for help when they need to. So always ask for help when you need it. Now, here's what I want you to do. This program, hopefully you've got it copied and pasted over, needs to be fixed. So go fix it. And what I want you to do is pause the video, go fix it, and then I'm going to go back through it. All right, so I'll give you a few seconds here. All right then. So I'm assuming you paused the video and you went through the project and voila, you're all perfectly fixed. You ran it and it didn't break. So let's go through the different errors that are here. Now let's look at the first line. This value is supposed to be 89, but I wrote 90. That would be a logic error if I left it the same. This right here sets a string J and its value should be the word Bob. Well, it doesn't know what string is because string is supposed to be capital S. We go down. Now, this is a logic error that will crash, as you saw a little while ago. If I divide by 0, the whole program just, doesn't say there's an error there. You can do math. It's not going to specifically look for the divide by 0. You can't divide by 0 in math. Now, I have heard and seen in memes that Chuck Norris has done it twice. But that's Chuck Norris. Normal people and computers can't. Now, we move on to the next line. Set up an integer p and set its value to 5. Now notice I've got string here. If you don't read the comment, you might put quotes around that, but this is supposed to be an integer. An integer is int. Now, I need to print out this one plus that. Well, if I'm just printing it out, it's supposed to be a capital S, system.out.println. Now, this is very common early on. String should be set to the value rusty. Well, that's rusty. But if it's a string, it's got to have quotes around it. So, like so. This should print out. Oh wait, when I did this, it malfunctioned, but that should print out hello. This should be Jerry. And notice if I hover over it, it's actually missing a semicolon. This is fairly easy, like so. Now, some people look at this line and be like, well, that's broken. It's wrong. It doesn't say print line. But you can print, too. I think I've mentioned that. I use print line more than anything, but print will put it on one line, basically. Now, this should print out the name in the name variable. This is very common to just misspell something. Its name. Print line instead of print line. Also fairly common. And this, when I Alt-Shift-F'd it, kind of messed up here, but this is missing a quote, which it should say like unclosed string literal, meaning a quote's missing, like that. And if all of this runs, ta-da, it works. And that's just a quick rundown of errors. Now, of course, as we go through the class, you're going to have more errors. You're going to have to learn those too. Uh, you'll get more syntax errors early on, and you'll get the logic and runtime errors later. And the logic errors get worse and worse the more code you pack into something. You look at a game or program that has quite literally hundreds of thousands of lines. There's going to be a logic error somewhere. How many people have used a program and it suddenly crashed? Whatever it happens to be. Well, it could be one of two things. One, the programmer screwed up. Somewhere in the code, it didn't do what it was supposed to do and it crashed. Two, it might not be the program at all. It could be Windows or whatever operating system you're working on. One issue I recall back in, I think it was Windows Vista days, everyone hated it because it's like management of memory and various other things was just horrendous. Uh, so all these people had these programs that were perfectly fine, but because of the memory management and everything, it crashed constantly. So you had a lot of programs that just really stopped working on Vista. I never got Vista. I always skipped. Like you're supposed to skip every other Windows version because the previous version sucks. If you don't believe me, think of this: Windows 95, people liked. 98, people hated. XP was good. Vista sucked. 7 was good. 8, everyone hated. And now Windows 10, they decided to just go ahead and skip the number 9, I guess. Uh, Everyone likes that for the most part too. So that means the very next version after 10, whatever they're going to call it, uh, as of now hasn't been put out. So that means that it's probably going to suck too, if they follow their 20-year record currently. So there you go, correcting errors. Now, if you have any questions or problems, feel free to let me know. Now, I will post a cheat sheet here later. Hopefully by the time this video is here, I'm going to post this cheat sheet. And you'll see everything that we've talked about thus far. Printing something on the screen, a variable, text and a variable, variable text and more text and variable, a pop-up box, the J option pane, for example, declaring variables, which we've discussed. And next video will be reading input. And then, we got a little bit more down here, which will be later in the class, as you can see. Actually, I need to add more to this, even more than what I've got here. I always get lazy here at the very end of the semester and don't add the last stuff. Hopefully, I'll add some more to it. Now, if you have any questions or problems, just let me know.